Hey guys, that's right. Welcome back from Las Vegas. I'm home. My voice is almost back. Man, it's taken 2 weeks to get my voice back, and that was from my second Vegas trip. My third Vegas trip. Whole time I could barely talk, but I still had a blast. And Dad flew in and joined me on the third day, and we tore the town up. You guys already know what we were doing. Derrick Broze is in the studio. Somebody that I've been dialoguing with in emails, and Big John's been talking to him, I think, for about 6 months. We just have hectic schedules, and I know he's back and forth from Houston and Mexico, and he's involved in a lot. So we'll wait for this military helicopter to get out of my business. That's pretty loud. So let's see. I don't have a whole lot of announcements. I just want to, I did have an errant ad for the day, Shanta Meter. It was really interesting how she came up on the list right now because she's the one that did the tarot reading that had predicted that somebody in my inner circle didn't have my best intentions and and that ended up being very, very true. And it was caught in time, and it actually very fortuitous because they ended up lifting a piece of software that was incomplete. And it wasn't working. It's the whole reason I had this other project going. So the timing was divine. So anyway, I'm going to give you all some updates about that later, but I'm not going to make my guest wait. Shanta Meter's ad's going to have to be later because once the StreamYard app is open, I couldn't download her ad. So y'all excuse me. And Shanta, if you're listening, your errant ad will be posted on the next live video. And I do believe we have Dr. Rimka. I've talked to her for a while too. She's doing an ad right after that. But let me remove my intro. Introduce very interesting guy. He's very, very involved in community stuff. And let's go and introduce Mr. Derrick Broze. How you doing, sir?
What's going on, brother? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear your audio is fantastic, man. I apologize for my voice, but I've lost some decibel. Vegas kind of stole my vocal cords.
All good. I can hear you just fine.
Excellent. So we had some technical.
I want to let you know, by the way, real quick, that I am streaming on my channel, my YouTube channel, The Conscious Resistance YouTube, and on my Twitter as well. So shout out to everybody who's watching through there. This should be an interesting bringing together of audiences.
Awesome. That's great. So, I must be a virgin streamer because I have never done that before. And you educated me. I didn't even know that was an option until you showed it to me.
Yeah, I've been trying to do that recently. So it's cool whenever we can combine audiences. And it seems like from what I've shared prior to our conversation that there are definitely some people in my audience who are aware of your work, of course. And I see some comments there. I think we got a lot of Houston love right now.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt. There's Houston's the closest thing to me. I'm way up here in Willis.
Yeah.
But
I'm in family in Conroe as well.
I'm in Houston all the time. Yeah, when I say the big city, yeah, I mean Conroe. That's where I go. Yeah. That's where I go. So it was the crossover. It was people that listened to you. And it was just people that were a part of both communities that kept asking me, "Hey man, do you know Derrick Broze? He's like local to you." And I do podcasts with people all over the world, but I don't think I've ever done one with somebody local, with somebody out of Houston. So I do Houston meetups, and a couple hundred of us get together and about twice a year, and we have some fun. We rent out on the northwest side of Houston. Over by 249, we rent space twice a year, and we just all get together and have a blast. And I've had a lot of people come in, like Martin Leakey, Autodidactic, Max Egan. They will join us in Houston from time to time. We just have some fun.
Maybe I'll have to make it out to one of them. I'll be back in Houston for June and some of the summer, so maybe we'll connect then in person.
Yeah, man, that's great. Houston's a 50-minute drive for me. It's nothing. It's nothing. Go straight down 45. So we got a lot of moderators in the chat today. That's good. Thank you guys for joining us. It's what is this organization that you founded? Is it just strictly for Houston? Is this nationwide? Is this transnational? Because I know you spend a lot of time in Mexico. What exactly is this foundation that you founded?
Well, I've started a few things. Do you mean the shirt I'm wearing, the Freedom Cell Network, or
Yeah,
do you mean
yeah.
like my website, The Conscious Resistance? Yeah, maybe I could just do a little intro to your audience for those who don't know about my work. I can
Yeah,
share about some of
yeah.
those projects,
That'll be
and
good.
then maybe after that, you can do the same for my audience if you don't mind.
Sure.
Yeah. So thanks everybody for having me. My name is Derrick Broze. Originally born and raised in Houston, mainly on the west side, but lived in downtown up until I left in March 2020. And I've been living in central Mexico now. And I do come back and forth because my family's in Katy, my partner, her family's in Conroe. So, we're all up in Houston and come back and forth. So I've been there, but my journey here as far as activism and what I do now, independent journalism, making documentaries, writing books, etc. It started in 2010. 2010, I was starting to just pay attention to the world. It's one of the areas actually that I think we have somewhat in common. I didn't spend nearly as much time behind bars as you did, but I'd spent about 19 months over in Atascocita and a couple other places downtown and things of that sort. I got arrested at 20 years old for drug possession. I was addicted to crystal meth and right out of college and right out of high school when, started drinking, started partying, got locked up at 20, turned 21, locked up. And I got out October 2008. And that was kind of while I was behind bars is where I started getting into, I guess, opening up to spirituality, meditation, prayer, some of these things. I had a really strong grandmother who was a big influence in my life. And she started just sending me books and on, things like that, and kind of used that time to start healing some of my own traumas. So when I got out in October 2008, Obama's, about to be elected. I wasn't really political at any point, but I've always been a young punk metalhead. So I never trusted the government or anything like that, but not with any kind of philosophical understanding. And then, it was in that space as I started to kind of get out. I'm a felon, exploring that whole realm of, as you know, of being a felon and being judged for all kinds of things. Can't get a job here, can't rent here, etc. I started to question the world around me. I started to question the drug war. I started to question government in general. And that eventually led me to start an activist group in 2010 called the Houston Freethinkers. And from about 2010 till 2017, 2018, that was pretty much my life. I mean, I lived in a activist house with a couple of other guys, and every month we did meetings, we did protests, we did rallies. We always focused on solutions. So doing skill shares, like teaching people how to make their own soap or bake their own bread, or how to, building gardens, doing urban farming in some of Houston's poorest neighborhoods, confronting politicians when necessary, protesting at the Federal Reserve, that whole thing. That was pretty much my life. And along that path, I started to realize that the media sucks and that, that they weren't really doing their job. We basically had like long story short, we had an incident where one of our community events that we were hosting, it was like a fundraiser. We had a couple hundred people come out, lots of bands. It was a good time. And the HPD showed up with like 15 cars deep, pulled out the shotgun on a crowd of 100 unarmed people, cocked it and pointed it at them. We got it all on video. They arrested me. And that was like our first little taste of going viral. We got on InfoWars. We were interviewed by all the local media. And it was interesting. All the media showed up once I got out of jail, about 24 hours for failing to follow a lawful order of a police officer. We collected all the video. We put a press release together and sent it out. And within an hour, all the media was at my house and they were interviewing me and they were friendly. But then once they ran their stories that night and they started posting their articles, they said a local group of conspiracy theorists surrounded the police and, totally spun this story like we were the violent, people, whatever. And that was my first taste of like, okay, so they're full of it, and then I started just picking up a camera, going and confronting cops, going to the Federal Reserve and asking questions. And then eventually started to go to press conferences for the mayor, confronting the mayor about everything from fluoride to, human trafficking to all kinds of stuff. And then, going to press conferences, confronting the chief of police. And over the years, I started to take it more seriously. So that's what I do. I currently write for the Last American Vagabond now. It's my full-time gig. So I write weekly articles. I started my own website, The Conscious Resistance, theconsciousresistance.com, because I wanted a place where I could explore, kind of much like you, everything from, just asking questions about conspiracies and the occult and, some of these more esoteric ideas, as well as doing hard-hitting journalism about political and governmental corruption. So my website kind of explores, a range of topics, everything from UFOs and time travel to what's the government up to, what the corporation's up to, and then of course solutions. And about 2015, I was in Austin, Texas with some other activists, and I first heard about this idea of freedom cells. And it was my buddy John Bush back in Austin. He was giving this talk, and at that time he was calling it the Central Texas Mutual Aid Society. And he had just had this idea of saying, like, you know, government's not going to solve our problems, and we shouldn't just sit around and wait for that to happen. And we also shouldn't just give up and be apathetic. What if we started thinking about coming together on like the neighborhood level, on the, you know, the community level, and organizing these decentralized groups, mutual aid groups. And he was just developing that idea. And he was talking about coming together in groups of 8 to 10 people. And there's some pretty good research out there about group dynamics and social dynamics, about how keeping groups, you know, you don't want to have only just a couple of people where you can't get, you know, anything done, but you don't want to have too many people, then there's, you know, too many heads, too many ideas. And so there's some research about this ideal number of 8 to 10 people having local groups like that. And so eventually it started to be called Freedom Cells. And that name came for 2 reasons. And one way, it's sort of a trolling and of the government and their propaganda about terrorism and terror cells. And so we're like, all right, well, we're going to be freedom cells. You know, we're going to be people promoting freedom and liberty. But also the way we kind of think about it is like each cell or group, people call them hubs, hives, circles, whatever. The goal is, like, let's say you come together in Willis with a group of like-minded people, and I come together with a group of like-minded people in Houston. This is actually where I originally started it. After I learned about it from Houston and Austin, I came back to Houston and I started organizing with people who were really serious about like setting goals, maybe a little bit of prepping, you know, trying to have more privacy oriented tech, growing food. You know, what the goal is, that you come together as a decentralized group, figure out what is everybody interested, what are our goals, what do we want to try to accomplish, and then work to do that. But let's say you've got a cell or a hub up in Willis, and I've got one in Houston. Maybe once a month, all the sort of local cells come together. We get together for like a social event, but we also say, hey, what are you guys working on? What projects are y'all working on? Let's take some ideas from you. Let's apply it here. And so I was just really inspired in 2016 by this idea, just started doing it in Houston, started putting out videos about how freedom cells could be applied to growing food or self-defense or, you know, all kinds of ideas. And we had an old website, but it wasn't until COVID 1984 came around that this idea really took off. I mean, I'd been promoting it for years and giving speeches and talking about it, encouraging people. And some people got it. You know, I think the website prior to COVID had about 1,500 people on it. And then, you know, once COVID happened, and since then, there's 40,000 plus people around the world now. And especially during COVID, we saw some pockets like in Australia where things were really locked down. People really gravitated towards this idea. India was really popular for a while, different pockets in the US. And the website, which is freedomcells.org. And again, that's cells like CELLS.org. Because what I was going to say a moment ago is, to me, it's also like each group is individual, it's unique, it's powerful on its own. But then the bigger goal is that we start interlocking these groups, and it's not just one group in one part of town, but we come together on the local level and on the regional level. And so the cells are like the cells in our body. Each one of them is unique and powerful. It's doing its own job, but then it's also collectively part of this bigger organism, which is us. And so the idea with the Freedom Cell Network is you could have a cell in India or Africa or Canada or whatever else. But as these groups are building, and in the beginning, they're kind of just social clubs so that people can come together and not feel so alone. And that's really the purpose they served in COVID. But the bigger picture that myself and John believe is going to be necessary, especially as the world gets more tumultuous, is that these groups are going to help form like a parallel structure outside of these mainstream systems. And that's kind of what we're working towards. So the website, the main goal of the website, it's not meant to be like another social network. It's pretty much like, if you're a person listening to this and you're like, that sounds cool, but I don't know anybody in my own community. Well, we have maps on the website, so you can go create a free account. You put what are your interests, what are your skills, you know, what are your goals, fill out the profile. And we don't want your home address, but just put like, say, Willis, and, you know, that pins you on the map. And then what you can do is you can search the individual maps and the member and the group maps, and it'll show you. You can say, show me all the groups within 50 miles of me, and it'll show you every group that exists. You can check them out. Oh, look, they're having a meetup in a couple of weeks. Let me go meet with those people, connect with like-minded people in your area, leave the website behind. You know, that was kind of the original goal. So some people are active on Freedom Cells on the Telegram app. Some people are active on our website. But it was really cool as I was traveling around giving talks during COVID. People were telling me, like, when they were totally locked down and they had, you know, they were freaking out, they used the Freedom Cells website and the maps to find other people, to have these like underground, you know, quote unquote illegal meetups so that they could just, some people use the website to meet other people and they bought land together. Some of them started growing food together. Some of them started homeschooling their kids. And,
Wow.
I will say, unfortunately, as things have calmed down since COVID, there's less like energy in it. And it just seems like that's kind of unfortunately the way humanity works often, is like people get, when shit's rough, people are like, oh my God, I need solutions. I need to find community. And then things calm down. They're like, oh, whatever. I don't need to worry about that. But the website's still there. The idea is still there. And I continue to promote it in my works. And we can talk more about that. But yeah, that's kind of now like I said, I make documentaries. I'm finishing up a 17-part documentary series called The Pyramid of Power. People can check that out at thepyramidofpower.net. I've written a couple of books that you can find at theconsciousresistance.com. And, I focus a lot on technocracy and sort of the digital infrastructure and how that intersects with AI, of course, which I think is something, will be interesting to talk to you about today, because I know that you have a lot to say on that front as well. But yeah, man, I'm just happy to be here, happy to connect with you and your audience. And like I said, I'd love for you to share. I know you've got a big, long story as well. So if you want to share some of it with my audience, I'd love that.
Yeah. First of all, I have to commend you, because as my community well knows, I've got about 920 something videos on this channel, probably close to 200 podcasts on other people's channels. I got Archaix TV as 250 something videos, and never in the history of Archaix has anybody shut me down on my own channel for 10 minutes and just had me listening. That was very impressive. That was very impressive.
I appreciate that, brother. And no intention to shut you down on your channel.
Yeah, I can tell you're well read. I can tell you've read quite a bit. A lot of times it's what people don't say when ordinarily they should, if they were trying to explain things and simplify things for people. Enunciation, diction, it tells a lot about somebody. I can tell you've gotten a lot of your information from the written word, as opposed to just watching a lot of, that's the trash we're dealing with today. A lot of content creators, which you're not so much a content creator, you're more of an activist and a commentator. But a lot of the content creators across YouTube now, they're just becoming more and more garbage. They just watch other YouTube videos and other platforms, and then they come up, spin their own theories at it, and they're just adding to the filth that's already polluting the field. But oh yeah, my own story is, I've told it many times, but 26 years in prison, it's not much different. I mean, most people can't believe this when I say it. They have to live through it. But the most critical part about being incarcerated is the first 6 months, the first 180 days, because you're still clinging to everything in the world. You're still thinking about everything. You still feel like you're a part of all the things that you were a part of in society and in the world. But once you hit that year mark, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 10 years, 15, 25, it's all the same. Once you've done a year incarcerated, you're completely divorced from anything. You're already a part of whatever the new system is that you're incarcerated around. And once you make that mental change, for me, it was all about the absorption of information. It was all about just coming across whatever I could read. And I was fortunate because Texas prison doesn't spend money on libraries. So all these old colleges from 1910s, 1920s, 1930s, when these colleges get rebuilt, they fund new libraries, and they just trash their old libraries, and they end up in Texas prison. So I had access to a lot. I had access to a whole lot of good literature. But I was 17 years old, and I got caught up, and we kidnapped a 19-year-old girl, but we didn't even want to take her. We wanted her dad's Lexus, and a guy named Joey, we called him Joey, his name's John Ernesto, and we were both 17-year-olds shooting smiley faces in Houston stop signs with a .22 pistol. And we just kept reloading the pistol, driving around in stolen vehicles until the gas ran out, and we were shooting the smiley faces and all these stop signs. So this is what made our charge aggravated, because we had that pistol on us with 2 bullets on it. But we stole this girl's Lexus, and she didn't want to get separated from it. We didn't know that she had taken it from her dad's garage without his permission. And so for the next 8.5 hours, we went to restaurants, we went joyriding, we went everywhere with this girl. And all she wanted was the keys back when we were done so she could get it back in the garage before her mom and dad returned from their vacation. And it's just things got out of hand. And the guy that I was with pulled something that I would have never foreseen, because I went to school with him and I didn't know it was a part of his character type. And aggravated kidnapping was later dropped to a sexual assault charge. So I got jammed up with a guy who worked to deal with the state's evidence. And then I got involved in a multi-million-dollar lawsuit because the family ended up suing C-Tech Securities, Marshall Fields, and the Galleria for multiple millions of dollars. And I got wrapped up in a real weird investigation, because all the camera footage showed that she had come outside in the parking lot to talk to us twice. And it looked real bad on her part. They were trying to claim that she had set the whole thing up so she could sue them for millions of dollars. And she was 19, we were 17, and the lawsuit dragged on for like 2 years. And then the politics got involved. And then a guy out of Fifth Ward, Texas, named Marvin Bell killed an HPD cop. And I don't know how old you are, Derrick, or if you remember this, but in 1990 and 1991, this was the only major news story. And his name was Marvin Bell. It's still all over the internet. Wow. But he killed an HPD cop, and he was assigned to the 239th District Court, where I was going to court. And I already had my court paperwork, everything was set up for me to sign for 90 days boot camp. And my prosecutor was Mark Vincent, and his investigator. It's called a PSI investigator. Harris County uses PSIs for the prosecutor's office. It's a pre-sentence investigator who talks to the victim's family, talks to everybody involved, goes to the stores, Marshall Fields, C-Tech Securities, the Galleria, because we stole her car from the parking lot of the Galleria. And the PSI investigator gets the whole story from everybody, talks to everybody, and then gives their recommendation to the prosecutor. And then the prosecutor takes it, if he likes it, to the judge. So my prosecutor, Mark Vincent, was a real big black dude, about 6'3", and he had agreed with my family and the victim's family, that for my participation, which was driving, was I should do 90 days boot camp. So 2 days before I go to trial, they put Marvin Bell, who just killed an HPD cop. And it was, cops hardly ever get killed. So this is huge news in 1990. I ended up going to court in 91. Marvin Bell was issued into my court, and everybody's there. Marvin Zindler, Houston TV News, ABC, NBC, CBS, Geraldo, everybody is in my court watching my judge, because he's one of the most liberal. His name is Judge Norman Lanford. He's one of the most liberal judges in the history of Harris County, and the police department hated him because he was always letting criminals go. So anyway, make a long story short, as soon as it was discovered that Marvin Bell was incarcerated just a week earlier, and that my judge, Norman Lanford, let him go on a technicality on a violent crime, and then he got out and killed a cop, my judge was under hellified national scrutiny. So about 85 of us were all sent to the Texas Department of Criminal Justice on hyperinflated charges. He completely ignored every prosecutorial recommendation. He threw my 90 days boot camp. I was there to sign 90 days boot camp. So even my prosecutor said what's being done to me is absolutely illegal under the laws of compulsory process. Compulsory process means I signed an agreement with the prosecution, and I gave a full accounting of the entire night in my participation in a guilty plea, and I gave it to the prosecutor in exchange for my 90 days boot camp. Its compulsory process is absolutely illegal, and it's when I was compelled to plead guilty and for a certain outcome, but the judge completely ripped that outcome away from me and sent me straight to prison as a 17-year-old. So even my prosecutor provided me my paperwork on how to appeal all that. Unfortunately, Governor George Bush became the governor, and that's a whole other story. I've talked about it on YouTube before and our Archaix TV. But
can I just ask a question real quick, Jason?
Sure, go ahead.
because and I don't want to interrupt your story, but it's interesting you say that, because I mean, it happened to both of us. I mean, obviously there was much different consequences, but I did the same thing when I signed my papers. They told me, because it was my first ever, I'd been arrested for like, public intoxication as I was starting to become more of a fuck up, but getting caught with crystal meth was my first real crime. And when I signed, it was a Friday, and they told me, sign today, you're going to get probation, you'll be home on Monday. And that whole weekend, I remember just sitting in the county, just like, and showing my papers to some other people. And they're like, yeah, I mean, I guess you're supposed to get out, but something just didn't feel right. And then sure enough, the same thing, when I went back to the judge, she was like, okay, well, I'm not going to let you go home. Instead, we're going to sentence you to 2 years felony. So after I'd signed, pretty much exactly what you're describing, after I was told one thing that I was signing for, they turned around and did the exact opposite.
Yeah, man, it shocked my prosecutor. It shocked the PSI investigator, because Harris County, during my appeal, that was the main issue. Harris County never goes against the PSI because it's a financial deal. It actually helps the court facilitate the docket. There's too many people on the docket, so to clear the docket fast, they have these PSI investigators get all the facts and give the recommendations to the prosecutors. And this is the system for 25, 30 years. And all of a sudden, this guy lets a cop killer go. And so now he's trying to save his bench, and he's trying to make Harris County happy and the Houston Police Department happy by sending every single person that comes before his bench straight to prison. So 2 months later, Harris County removed him from the bench, because now he's not even adjudicating anything. He's just sending everybody to prison. That's all he's doing. So all this is documented online and internet. And I've had other YouTubers, when I started getting real popular, go deep into my criminal history and try to expose and try to find things out. And I tell them all the time, I says, dig all you want. It only costs $279 from the court records. You'll find out that everything I told you is the truth.
I wanted to give
Owen Benjamin look me up. Owen Benjamin got all my court records. But I've had a lot of people look me up and all. I just don't care, Derrick. I don't give a damn.
I know the feeling. I mean, I feel like if you know who you are, you don't have to hide from it. But I wanted to make sure to give you a chance to do that. You're kind of bringing that up because, my job as a journalist, of course, I'm naturally, maybe you can resonate with this, I'm naturally skeptical of every single person I meet in life. And maybe that's my own trust issues. But I did look up some of the videos, and there's definitely a lot of haters. You've got them just like I do. Talking about the sexual assault angle. So you're saying that the sexual assault charge was kind of part of the railroading aspect, that you weren't involved in sexual assault?
Well, no, it's not a part of the railroading aspect, because under Texas law, if you're there, you're complicit if you're not trying to stop it, or if you don't willingly walk away right then and there and report it to the police. But we were with this girl for 8.5 hours. We went to restaurants. She had multiple times to just flee to all kinds. This is why her multi-million-dollar lawsuit against C-Tech Securities, Marshall Fields, and the Galleria took so long, because it really did look like she had set up the whole thing. Because on camera, there were two separate incidents where she just targeted John and I and came out there and just hung around and talked and then left. Then came back, hung around, and her story every time was, "Hey, have you seen this big black truck? I'm waiting on my boyfriend to pick us up." And it was John, who we called Joey as a kid. It was Joey who actually stopped and asked her on the second time, say, "How did you get here?" That's what he asked her. He said, "How did you get here?" Because this is the second time she approached us, and all this was on film. So he said, "How did you get here?" And she says, "Oh, well, I drove my dad's Lexus. It's in the parking garage." So shit, Joey we were looking at a Pontiac Firebird, because I don't know how much you know about all this, but in the 80s, GM vehicles had a flaw in the tilt box. And there's one little area on every single GM vehicle from the 70s and 80s had this flaw in the tilt box. They don't make cars like this anymore, but you could actually take a large flathead screwdriver and break open the plastic casing and go in there, and you'll find a toothed ignition, and you could break the steering lock, which is a single little diagonal wire. You could break that steering lock and then pull that tooth back, and all the ignition would come back. Apply a little bit more pressure, pulling back, excuse me, and the whole vehicle would turn on. And back then, the plexiglass windows on the Firebirds were real easy to bend out. So here we are, teenagers. We don't learn how to lift these GM vehicle cars, and that's all we were there for. And we were waiting for the the parking lot to clear when she came out a second time from Marshall Fields, which faces Westheimer. Second time she's on camera coming out there hanging around us, talking. And then after a while, John just asked her, said, "What? You keep waiting on your boyfriend? Well, how the hell did you get here?" And that's when she says, "Well, my car's out in the back. I got my dad's car. It's in the parking garage." So John just said, "Shit." He pulled a 22 pistol out right there in the parking lot, facing Westheimer, on camera, in front of Marshall Fields. That's why he had a screw loose. But he pulls the 22 pistol out. He didn't point it at her. He just showed her. He said, "Well, shit, walk us to your car." And shit, they just started walking. And from right then and there, at 17 years old, my whole life changed. I shouldn't have followed them. I had no idea what was happening. Kidnapping wasn't even on the menu. I had no idea what was going on. And
But you're saying he was the one that was involved in the sexual assault, and they charged you?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. That's in the court records. Yeah, he raped her. There's no doubt. Yeah.
In the car? Was that in the car?
Yes, absolutely.
Wow.
So, I mean, it wasn't one of those situations where there was any resistance or there was any fighting or anything like that. And this is another reason why this came out. All this shit came out about, I mean, she was under a whole lot of scrutiny, and ultimately, they had visited me like 4 times in the county jail because my story was so detailed. I just told the truth. I had no idea in the background until later on when I started receiving all this stuff in the mail from my family. I had no idea she was up under the gun because of this lawsuit against C-Tech Securities, Marshall Fields, and the Galleria, because all the footage they had and all the eyewitnesses shit they had really painted a picture of her activity being totally premeditated. But I had to defend her. Here's another strange thing that came out of this. I'm one of the perpetrators. I am one of the perpetrators that carjacked this girl, and yet I was her chief defender because she was under all this scrutiny. And in my statements, I said, well, you know what? She could have never predicted John pulling a pistol out and then telling her to walk. She would have never been able to predict that. So
yeah. I appreciate you sharing that. I know you've gone over it a bunch, on your own channel.
Yeah,
and stuff.
It's no big deal. It's not even no big deal, man. We're
know.
talking about something 35 years ago.
Yeah, it's this November will be 20 years since I got arrested. So I totally understand like how it feels like a different life. I did want to dig in a little bit just for my audience sake, because again, I know that there's some of my audience who know about your work and your research and everything that you're focused on, but you kind of touched on the fact that you got access to books from old colleges, and maybe you could share more about that, and kind of we can lead into what your research is about.
First of all, Derrick, our listeners have to understand that the world that I'm describing in Texas prison that I entered in as a teenager is not the world today. The world today is so different in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. When I was released in 2016, the old books were still there. But now they have given prisoners, since my release in 2016 at 43 years old, I did 26 years. And I didn't do 26 years for the original conviction. I did 26 years because George Bush became the governor of Texas. And one of the first things George Bush did was pass new retroactive laws that affected people who were in prison. My original 7.5 years that I was supposed to do in Texas prison, I was supposed to get out when I was 24. That all changed when George Bush retroactively applied all the parole laws and made every single individual do twice the time. It's absolutely illegal. Every state that's tried it failed in the appellate system, but not Texas.
The Bushes have sure fucked up a lot.
Texas retroactively applied criminal laws and made us do twice the time. And this is when Texas went from the quarter law to the 50% law. So when that did that, you have to understand from my perspective, here is a 17-year-old that wasn't expecting to go to prison, thought he was going 90 days boot camp, shoved into prison for 7 years, and at the 6.5 mark, all of a sudden, I'm notified that I have to do 15 flat years to come up for parole, and that's not what I was sent for. So I'm supposed to come up for parole at 7.5 years. What do you think I did, Derrick? Do you think I acted good? Do you think I went with their program? Hell no. When I realized that, man, my fate is not in my hands, you know what? I started doing time the way I wanted to. I went to maximum security. I went to closed custody, administrative segregation. I started working deals with boss ladies. I started having my family give me cash and money, so I was able to broker deals. I started entering relationships with sergeants, lieutenants, captains, majors, and even
Do what
assistant
you got to
wardens.
do to survive.
I started smuggling contraband. I created a financial empire from in prison, even to the point where I was able to send friends and family money from prison. And I had money spread throughout the prison. I went ahead and just started doing time my way. And I told the parole board to F off. It's on record that I literally threatened the Texas parole board. I told them, okay, well, listen, man, you know what? You've left me no choice but to become the very monster that you pretended that I am. I'm going to be that one. I promise you, the day you release me from prison, I am going to fulfill the very destiny that you wrote for me, since you won't let me write my own. Man, I did all these promises, and I got prosecuted in prison. I got stacked time while I was serving time in prison. That's why I stayed so long. They gave me 7 years for a cell phone. I also got wrapped up in stabbings. None of those were my fault, but and I wasn't the aggressor. But yeah, I got chased across a prison yard one time with a guy with a knife, and like any guy would, I ran until I saw a really good opportunity to turn it around, and I ended up beating the crap out of him, taking the weapon and poking him in the butt with it. But yeah, I got in a lot of trouble for that too. But it doesn't matter. Anything you do in prison, you get in trouble. So after a while, let me just abbreviate that. While I'm going through all this, 17 years old, all the way to 35, 34, 35 years old now, and I'm going through this. I'm still the person I was in the free world intellectually. And what I mean is, my own community already knows this, but I was raised in a very puritanical Southern Baptist family. And one thing my mother always made me do every single week, 52 times a year, we had to go to the Bedford Public Library. And my mom would check a book out, and I had to read it. But it gave me the right to check any book I wanted. I picked all the Lord of the Rings books, the Chronicles of Narnia's books, Star Wars books. I'm a kid. This is what I want. So my mother made me read whatever book she checked out for me. But once I was done with it every week, and I hurry up and read it so I could get to the book I wanted to read, and then I would read all these sci-fi and fantasy books because that's what I was into as a kid. But this turned me into an intellectual. It turned me into a reader. By the time I was in prison, I was already devouring everything. Some guys had Wall Street Journal. Some guys had Fort Worth Star Telegram, USA Today. I devoured the newspapers, Popular Mechanics, you already know all the social magazines. I read them all. I read Street Low and Low Rider, all the magazines. But the main value I found was the library, because Texas doesn't spend money on libraries. They just get them donated from older institutions. So I was sent to Lovelady, Texas, the famous Eastham unit where the Bonnie and Clyde story developed, where Clyde Barrow was an inmate for 2 years, where they killed the major in a gunfight. Yeah, all this is in the 1920s and 30s, and I was at that facility. And the new Eastham unit, which is very old, built in the 50s, is right next to the old Eastham original prison. Well, I was a part of a work detail that had to go to the older prison, and we went through the sub-basement. And we were told that they needed to clean all this stuff out, and we were supposed to throw it away. When I realized what was in those wooden crates, because that's what they were from the 1920s and 30s. When I started going through the wooden crates, and I saw these books are from the 1870s, 1880s, 1890s, all the way up to 1910, and so I started going through the subject matter, and I was filling up other crates. I emptied crates out while these guys were book burning. The other guys on my work detail had negotiated with me, and I said, hey man, just take the crates out that I sent you, because I'm saving all the historical books, chronology, anthropology, archaeology, science, religion, comparative mythology, all the books I wanted to read. I'm saving them and putting in these crates on the side while I'm giving these guys all the composition, English composition, math books, all the government books, all the history books. I'm not, and they're taking them out to the dumpster while the officers are upstairs watching inmates come up with these crates and putting them in this long truck. It's a long dump truck, and they're just throwing this away. This is what Texas does all the time when they do their spring cleaning. They just start throwing stuff away. They don't go through it. They don't even care. But when I realized we're throwing away the old Eastham library, I preserved hundreds of those books, put them off to the side. The officers were so cool with me when I was on Eastham. I mean, I've always been Jason. I'm one of the few guys in Texas prison that never had a nickname. I've always gone by my name, Jason. Everybody knew me as Jason, and I grew up with the administration. And what I mean is, I was 17 when I went in, and the COs at the time, the regular prison guards and sergeants at the time, sergeants being the lower level tiers of all prison administration, they were just a little bit older than me. They were 19, 20, 21. So over the years, as I'm growing up, here it is 20 years later, I'm on Eastham unit. They all know me. But they know me from being that kid. They knew me from when they were kids. So I kind of grew up with a lot of the prison. Now some of them are assistant wardens, majors, captains, lieutenants, sergeants. But I grew up with them and always had these advantages. And they let me take these books 2 and 3 at a time. It took like 5 months, but 2 and 3 at a time, I was able to take these books into the cell block. And I would read them, but I could only read 2 or 3 a week anyway. Some of these books were huge. So my education, the Archaix data that is so unique, and all these data sets that I've put together, these amazing source materials that I've provided, and you have to understand, Derrick, I wasn't a YouTuber until COVID. I wasn't. I had 13 books published, 6 of them by a legitimate publisher, the rest of them self-published through Amazon. But I had books published long before I ever entered social media. I was already a chronologist. I was already a respected author. I already had a following. My royalties were very healthy. And I'd already done all this way before I started a YouTube channel. So
were you writing the books while you were locked up? Did you start writing?
Absolutely. My first 4 publishing contracts came from a San Diego publisher while I was in prison, an academic publisher that has never, ever contracted with a convicted felon before and hasn't done it since. They just made an exception for me because of my bibliographies. And that's what puts my books, separates my books from so many others. Some of my books are huge. I got Chronicons 1,055 pages. Shocking Secrets of Antiquity is 455
I've purchased
pages.
a couple of them because I wanted to brush up.
But I've got some small books too, like When the Sun Darkens, Nostradamus and the Pat Plan, Awaken the Immortal Within. I got some small books too. And Awaken the Immortal Within is the only book I've ever published with no bibliography. And it can't have one because everything is straight out of my head. It is how I view the world. So all my other books are laden with bibliographic citations of all these unique books, and my own community has been shocked over and over to learn of the existence of books for which they've never even heard of. And then when they Google the books that I talk about, they find out, damn, Jason, can you make a PDF of that book? Because when we look on Etsy or Amazon or eBay, they're charging $600 a copy and you only have 2 copies available. Many of the books that I cite are extremely rare, Derrick, because the world has fundamentally changed since World War II. And the history books that are being published after World War II are not telling you what the history books before World War II published. We are being given a whole false reality.
Jason, real quick, just one of the things you're saying there, some of my audience is going to be familiar with this because, as I mentioned, I've been doing this Pyramid of Power 17-part documentary series for the last 5 years. And part of it is, of course, looking at the power structure and who's behind it. And I'm working on the final episode now, answering the question of who's at the top, which I want to get your opinion on in a little bit. But like I've got right here in front of me, Proofs of a Conspiracy, The Conspiracy Against the Liberties of the United States, Engineer Core of Hell. And those are books written in the 1800s, late 1700s. And it's definitely hard to find even like original copies of those. And so I definitely think that what you're saying is 100% accurate. I mean, there's been books that have been changed. They're hard to find. Or if you do find them, like you said, they're $1,000 or more to pick up an original copy of that. And
Right.
I want to dig in a little more just for the sake of my audience, because like I said, I did pick up the Chronicon. I've went through your website, and I can't claim to have read everything. Of course, you've got a massive amount of material, but I've been through it to understand, so that we could have a legitimate conversation here. And you get access to these books, you're bringing them back to your cell, you're reading them, you're studying them, you start writing books about them. Could you, and I know it's a big concept, but in as a concise as way as possible, could you sum up your theory after learning through all this? Like, you started to look back and see different historical references that you think point to a Phoenix event, something that happens every periodically throughout history. Could you talk more about that for those in my audience who aren't familiar with that thesis?
Sure, absolutely. I do want to backpedal just for a second for clarity. I never specified why the prison system is changed now. In 2016, sure. I was released. I just described for you what it was like in Texas prison in the 1990s and all the way up till about 2014. But I was released in 2016, and now I haven't been back. I've been out over 8 years. But I'm going to tell you now, the guys that I'm still in communication with, they have told me everything has changed. Now they're restricting their ability to carry a bunch of property. They can't have much. And the reason is because everybody in Texas prison is issued a tablet. And now all the approved books for reading are on the tablet. But because the tablet has movies and video games and puzzles and activities, it keeps people away from reading. The tablet is now how the Texas prison system controls the population. So the opportunities to do what I did when I put together a chronology of the world, Chronicon, and then found out about the Phoenix phenomenon, the Nemesis X object, the dark satellite, I found out this massive heartbeat of history every 138 years, these resets, I've literally researched myself right out of Christianity and into simulation theory. And it was totally natural, just a series of conclusions that I cannot escape. So this for just so you'll understand, like, this is a really good example of a book that I read in prison. Many of these all these books here are from the 1700s over here. And then I have books from the 1800s over here. And then I have 3 walls covered full of books. I've showed my community. I've turned the camera around before. I have a different mount. I'm not going to turn it this time. This mount here is really difficult to use. But I have like 6 different volumes of encyclopedias from the 1800s, Americanas and Britannicas and different years. And I have the entire Jewish encyclopedia. But this studio doesn't even account for maybe 20% of the Archaix library. I cannot fit all of my books. I have very rare books, and some of them have to be in climate controlled storage and in sealed totes, because they fall apart. This is from the 1880s. It's falling apart. But to give you an example, Derrick, this one book in prison would have taken me about 3 days to get through it. And what I would have done with a mechanical pencil, I would have read this book page for page like I did. My research bibliography is 1,257 books, or 1,357 books since I got out of prison. And I published it in a single YouTube video for everybody to see. Every title, every author, date of publication, and publisher, the entire list is on YouTube. These are the books I read in prison. In 25 years, it took me about 25 years to read 1,357 nonfiction books, all about this size. So I've read a few hundred since I've been out, new books that I've done videos on. As I learn, my community learns. So I would go through this with a mechanical pencil, and I would put little arrows next to any data that I wanted to mine. When I was done with this book, I would pull out my old 1960s typewriter in prison, the old mechanical typewriters you've seen on the movies, and I would sit there and type up all the notes from that book. Once I did that, the actual book no longer had any value to me, and I would pass it on to other prisoners for some of the type of books that they had, like the Graham Hancock type books and modern books. And in this way, I would educate myself on the old books and on what's being promoted in the field now, today. And this book wouldn't have to be carried by me anymore, because now I have the research notes. So every month I would pull my typewriter out, and this is how I would get rid of all the books that I acquired. So because my reputation throughout any prison I was located, everybody knew within weeks who I was. Oh, that's that Jason guy, man. He'll pay you money for your books. And I did. But I had a little criminal operation going, and even the officers were in on it. I've had officers come to get financial loans from me because I told you, Derrick, it's not because I'm a bad guy. It's because they literally rewrote the law after I had agreed. Twice now. Twice. The first time was I was going for 90 days boot camp, and they sent me to prison for 7.5 years. Then before my 7.5 years was over at 24 years old, I'm told that now, man, George Bush just enacted a retroactive law, and it makes everybody do actually double of the 25% that you signed up for. So no, man, it can't be. And by that time, I realized it was the truth, and inmates lost that lawsuit. What do you think, man? What do you think? I don't even feel guilty. I don't even feel guilty for everything I did in prison. I don't even feel an ounce of guilt. So this is what I did, reading and research. And after it was around probably when the Matrix movie came out, around 1999, when I started putting all my research notes together in chronological format. In 2004, I had my first breakthrough with thousands of notes from so many different books put into chronological order. Whatever I had, year by year, going back 7,000 years, I got everything in chronological order. You can't help but see the patterns when you start studying history with a calculator. I started seeing, okay, well, when this ancient cuneiform record from the kingdom of Hatti in 1273 BC says that when he was marching his army to the south to deal with rebels, the sun became darkened and obscured by unknown means. So a cuneiform text that we have his name. His name was King Merciless II. It sounds like merciless, like have no mercy, but it's not spelled that way. It's Mursilis. But King Merciless II left us a record of the sun darkening when he was marching his army, and he panicked because it wasn't normal. The moon, he said it was by unknown means. The moon didn't darken the sun. So 1273 at the time would not have told me anything. But then I read of the same thing in 1687 BC. I read of the same thing in 1411 BC. I read the same account word for word almost 1,000 years later in 583 BC, which was predicted by one of the 7 wise men of Greece named Thales of Miletus. And when I find out about Thales, I find out from Herodotus of Halicarnassus in his book, The Histories, 24 centuries old now. His book says that Thales of Miletus was a Phoenician by remote descent, and he had access to the records. So that leads me to Sanchuniathon, who was a Phoenician historian, 1000 BC. And I start putting these things together and say, wait a minute. All these people are saying the same thing, that these earthquakes happen when the sun darkens and the moon's not involved. And sometimes the stars seem to wander for a while, and then they go back to their original place. And there's these massive earthquakes, and there's a common denominator that linked every one of them. It wasn't just the sun darkening, and it wasn't just an earthquake. Red dust, red mud, or red rain, depending upon whatever the moisture or humidity was in that area of the world. But it was always red dust, red mud, or red rain that accompanied the event or happened just after the earthquakes were over. So that my first big discovery was 2004. When I went ahead and went through all my thousands of pages of chronological notes, and I put aside all the dates that I had: 3895 BC, 2239 BC, 1963 BC, 1411 BC. I skipped 1687 BC, 1825 BC. You have to understand, I almost memorize everything that I study. So I go through there, and it's 445 BC, 31 BC. Switching over to the AD calendar, it's 522 AD when dragons are seen fighting over ancient Britain, and the moon turns red, and there's red fallout from the sky. And I'm going through all this, and I'm like, what the hell have I found? But it was a single reference in a Jewish legend that was quoted by Tracy Twyman in one of her books, because I had a whole stack of Tracy Twyman books, very controversial author. But in her footnotes, which I photographed from my community and posted on my channel, in her footnotes, there is a Jewish, she refers to an old Jewish book from like 1910, 1911. And in that book, it said that when God decided to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, he had to punish two angels for 138 years because they had told humans that the destruction was coming. And I remember in Genesis, wait a minute, we had two angels that appeared, because I had read the Bible multiple times in prison. I said, man, wait, here it is. In Genesis, we had two angels that looked like men. They looked like men to the point that homosexual men who lusted over them in Sodom, and the whole story is given in the book of Jasher, which is a rabbinical history in chronological order. It's a fascinating text. So I'm putting all these pieces together, and it never left my mind that it was 138 years. The reason is because I'm a chronologist. Even by that time, I'm a chronologist, and highly specific numbers normally denote the truth. And I started putting things together, such as Aristarchus, a Greek naturalist and scientist that was very well respected and quoted by every Greek after him. Aristarchus was convinced that our world was destroyed every 2484 years. And then Rashi, 1,000 years ago, he writes that the world is destroyed between periods of 1656 years. And that's always been curious to me, because in the book of Genesis, from the Adam and Eve incident to the great flood, according to the book of Genesis, are 10 patriarchs. And when you add up their lives and deaths, every Bible commentary will show you it's exactly 1,656 years. 1656 years is the length of the pre-flood world. And that kind of shocked me. So I put these things in the back of my mind, but the 138 never left. And it was in my mind when I'm reading 1926 book by an engineer named David Davidson and his co-researcher H. Aldersmith. And I'm reading their book. It's called The Great Pyramid. It's Divine Message. David Davidson was an engineer using Sir Flinders Petrie's measurements, and he believes that the Great Pyramid is a massive engine that had a function, and yet it was a three-dimensional chronographical template of world history in the future, and that the Great Pyramid is a geodetic template of the northern hemisphere when something epically terrible is going to happen. And the final year of the Great Pyramid's timeline, according to this engineer, is the year 2045. And he says that time itself will be fundamentally different starting in 2046. And he said this in 1926 based off of his research. But in his commentary notes at the bottom of one of his pages, he specifically mentions an ancient Egyptian tradition of the Nile that recognized that a disaster had happened in ancient times. And the Egyptians did the same thing the Chinese did on the Yangtze River. They took little paper boats. These were papyrus boats made out of the bamboo papyrus in Egypt. In China, they were paper boats, but it's the same tradition. Placing a boat with a little votive sacrifice on the boat and putting it on the Nile River and letting the Nile take it away in remembrance of ancestors who escaped a cataclysm on a boat. He said that the tradition was only honored every 1,656 months in Egypt. And anybody who has listened to Archaix for any amount of time will understand that it is my research brought to the table that undermines Graham Hancock and Matt LaCroix and Billy Carson, and I've showed everybody, guys, listen, Atlantis wasn't destroyed in 9600 BC. There was never an Ice Age, Younger Dryas period when this happened. These guys are wrong because Plato made a fundamental error and thought that the 9,000 that Solon related to him referred to years, but it didn't, because Plato was told by Solon that the war happened shortly after Athens was founded. Athens was founded in 1365 BC. The Atlantean War against Athens is in the archaeological and historical record. It's called the Sea People's Federation War. And they're in the Egyptian records, the ancient Libyan records. The Phoenicians talked about them. They absolutely collapsed the ancient Hittite Empire. It was a trade war. And Homer, when he was talking about the Trojan War, had glossed over many of the details because Homer wrote his account 350 years after that war. So a lot of mythology came in because Homer, Hesiod, and Theognis are the first three Greek writers, and all they wrote were epics, and their epics were highly mythological. And the reason is because when the Trojan War concluded, a Phoenix phenomenon event occurred and it sank Atlantis. It disappeared the Sea People's Federation. Egypt was so happy because they were tired of defending themselves from these Atlantic fleets. They were Atlanteans, and when they came in, because they had overrun the Mediterranean, and they left colonies that later became known as Phoenicians and Philistines, and they left them right there next to Egypt, and Egypt feared these people. So when this cataclysm came, they never again heard of Atlantis because it was gone. The year of the cataclysm was 1135 BC, but it was systemic, meaning the entire world was affected. It's called the 300-year Great Mediterranean Dark Age, but literally it was a dark age over the entire world. And out of the ashes of that dark age came the great mythographers, because prior to that, everything was very scientific. Then out of the dark age, we have Homer's Odyssey, Homer's Iliad, Theognis, we have Hesiod, Works and Days. We have all these great epic Greek writers, but all their stories sound so mythological and silly. So
yeah. If I could interject real quick, brother.
Sure.
Thank you for sharing all that. And again, like I said, I'm familiar with most of this from checking out your channel, but I know that there's people on my channel who aren't familiar. So you made a lot of great references. I hope everybody will go back and check out some of the names you mentioned, because I had a fun few nights diving into your work and digging into the references and doing my own fact checking on things that I could find and such. What I think I find really interesting. So there's two things that you've mentioned that I'd like to poke at a little bit. The fact that you said that you kind of went from a Christian perspective to believing in simulation theory, and then also through studying history and studying references, including Atlantis, seeing that there is a periodic, cataclysm that you can, as you have, set a date to. And I find it really interesting. You referenced the gentleman, the Great Pyramid, its divine message, and his discussion of 2045. Could you just spend a moment, like, how do these two things intersect? Like, is the cataclysm built into the simulation? Like, periodically the simulation just resets, and that's sort of what we're witnessing and what people are referring to in historical documents? Is that what you've come to believe, or is that incorrect?
Okay, it is, and I do tend to wander because these are
I get it, man. You got a lot of info. I
was going to
understand.
say, if you were to look at these as data sets, you'll understand, man. It's just you can't help but wander. You can't help but entertain tangents. So just to take a step back for clarity, the ultimate discovery on the 1,656 months of the ancient Egyptian tradition made perfect sense, because anybody who has studied Egyptian calendars will know they did not honor the year. Not one time in 26 dynasties of ancient Egypt is there a single published Egyptian reference to any year-by-year chronology. They didn't start doing that until the days of the Greeks. And by the days of the Greeks, ancient Egypt had already fallen. So the last true Egyptian dynasty was the Nubian dynasty. When the southern Africans came up and overtook Egypt, it's called the Nubian dynasty. It's the true black dynasty of ancient Egypt, and it's the very last one. It's called the Nubian. So we don't have a dynastic, there are no annual dynastic records. This is what's made Egyptology so difficult to decipher, because there's no time where you can read that Thutmose the third, who was also Thutmose the first, who was also Amhos the second. It gets really convoluted because they changed their dynastic names, milk names, throne names according to the political structuring of the time. So there's never a time where you can read in the 830th year of certain dynasty. You won't, because ancient Egypt, when it came to years, started year one with the very first year of whatever pharaoh was sitting on the southern throne. The northern throne, called Lower Egypt, wasn't important because it was cosmopolitan. It was multicultural. It was an Amuru dynasty that was controlled by the Amorites, the Hittites, and the kingdom of Mitanni and Mari. It was never truly like southern Egypt. Most people don't understand when we're talking about Egypt, you're being told by modern like Graham Hancock and just the real watered down historians and like the History Channel, you're being led to believe, when they tell you about Egypt and they show you pyramids and all that, that there was only one Egypt. There's never been one Egypt. It has always been called the Two Kingdoms, and they've always been 450 miles apart. And the kingdom of the north is called Lower Egypt, and it's the only Egypt that has pyramids. The kingdom of the south, 450 miles less, is the Chemetian Egypt. It's the land of Kemet. It is the real, true, natural African Egyptians, and it has no pyramids at all. So there's a huge difference between the two pyramids, but the common denominator between them is that they were a lunar reckoning society. And when Solon got the story of Atlantis, he learned from the priests of Sais. How do we know? Because Plato told us. But any archaeologist, any historian worth their mettle, does even some light research on the Sais priesthood, you will find out that every 30 days equals a year under the Egyptian lunar system. So the 9,000 years that were told to Solon, the priest thought he understood that they meant this is what the Greek scholar who corrected Plato of Knidos told. He put it in his own writings that Plato made an error. It's 9,000 moons. And when you count it as 9,000 months, it lines up perfectly with the 13th century BC, when Athens was founded. Everything in Plato's story makes sense, and it is true. The only problem is chronographical. And this is what Archaix is about, correcting all this. And in correcting that, I had learned that every single date that I just provided you earlier, 3895 BC, 2239 BC, 1963, 1411, 1687, 1273, 1135 BC, 583, 445, 31 BC, 522 AD. All these dates that I just mentioned to you earlier, and there's more I haven't mentioned, they fit on a perfect timeline that is 138 years apart. Every single one of them. And all these amazing beliefs from the ancient world, like Aristarchus, who believed the world was destroyed every 84 years, Rashi, who believed that the world was destroyed every 1656 years, the Phoenix cycle from the ancient world, which is 552 years, the cursed earth system of biblical chronologist Stephen Jones in his book Secrets of Time, which is 414 years, the 1242 years of the pre-flood time between Adam and Noah, according to Michel del Nostradam, we know as Nostradamus. These are just a few. These are just a few, and yet every single one of these numbers is divisible by 138. Every single date that I just cited to you that comes from the historical record, not one of them did I date. I provide the dates in all these books from all these old sources. Every single one of these events, when there was earthquakes, the sun darkening, the moon was not involved, red dust, red rain, civilizations sinking into the ground as the earth vibrates. Whole cities just go. Tsunamis, earthquakes, all kinds of things. It's on a 138-year timeline. So yes, initially, I'm still 100%, Southern Baptist raised. Even in 2004, I'm still clinging to the idea that this Newtonian solar system universe that's been shoved down my throat edge is actually true. But the more I research chronology, I realize the chronological precision of the Phoenix phenomenon defies physics. There's no way any natural body in the heavens can appear every 138 years at the exact point in the middle of the month of May where Earth is positioned if the sun is truly moving at 240 something thousand miles per hour, as all the planets are going around the sun at Earth going 66,000 miles per hour at the exact same time that there's another ecliptic where other bodies like comets, Halley's Comet at 60 degrees, and then we have the dark satellite, we have the Nemesis X object, we have Phoenix every 138 years, and we have a whole nother Nemesis ecliptic because there's a collapsed binary. It's a dark star far below the system in what the Book of Enoch called the abyss. Anything below the equatorial bulge, anything below the southern hemisphere that the ancients could not see, because every single ancient pre-flood civilization was in the northern hemisphere. Why? Why do we have no evidence of any civilizations that existed in the southern hemisphere in the 3rd and 4th millennium BC? We have none, zero. Everything was in the north hemisphere, and this is only answered for in one scientist who published his research in 1871. It's called cyclical flood theory. And he believes that the earth has a heartbeat and that subsurface pressure is building. And then at specific times, that subsurface pressure blows out in the form of volcanoes. Volcanoes are the key identifier of the Phoenix phenomenon. It's ambient radiation that causes animals and people and plants to grow to astonishing sizes in the vicinity of those volcanoes. We have this scientifically documented. Even humans can grow 2 inches. Humans that are in their 50s and 60s have been documented to grow 2 inches just after a volcanic eruption by studying the area of the volcano. Beetles get 3 times bigger. All this has been documented. And in the Phoenix phenomenon, we have these episodes when the world is covered in a vapor canopy that's caused by volcanism. And instead of the world getting freezing cold, which is the scientific model perpetuated today, in the historical record, it's just the opposite. It's just the opposite. Antarctica and the Arctic lose all their moisture. Every bit of that goes up into the mesosphere. The mesosphere traps all this red particulates that the ancients thought was cinnamon. They thought cinnamon used to rain from the sky. And this vapor canopy would trap heat. And within 2 or 3 years, animals, people, and plants would start growing huge, not only because of the ambient radiation, but because of the ultraviolet filter. Whatever the mesosphere does to sunlight, it amplifies things' ability to grow. And people have replicated these conditions in hyperbolic chambers, like in Glen Rose, Texas. But to get back to your original question, I'm entertaining too many tangents. To get back to your original question, Derrick, simulation theory wasn't even on the table for me at all until right around COVID, when I started reprocessing all my data. Because you have to understand, in 2016, when I was released from prison, up until 2016, I had been separated from my research. Because when I got that old typewriter out and I typed out all the notes from each book I read, the typed notes and my own personal notes that went with them and put them in chronological order, they would, have to be sent home. And my dad would come about twice, sometimes once a year, and pick up a red chain sack. Huge, always about this tall, full of nothing but my chronological notes that were done since the last time he picked up a bag. And my dad always told me, I'm always asking, hey man, you make sure you get that bag put away. He said, yeah, they're all in the attic. I just throw them in the attic. I've told the story. I even teared up when I told the story on YouTube, but how my dad, he wanted to take me to a steakhouse the day I got out of prison. And I'm like, man, I don't want to go. I just want to go home. I don't want to do anything. And he was kind of frustrated with me, but all I wanted to do was see those bags. And because I had about 500 pages of chronological notes, but they're one-liners. The whole time I'm in prison, I put together Chronicon, but it's just a date in a one-liner or a two-liner of what happened, so I could have them as reference notes. But all my research notes were sent home. So at 43 years old, from being 17 years old, put in prison, at 43 years old in 2016, my dad takes me home. I go up into the attic. I open up the attic, and I sat there and I cried. All my books, all my bags. It was 25 or 26 bags, one a year. All of them were there. And I cried like a little kid. And I'm sitting there looking at all this. He saved every one of them. He doesn't know what he's doing. You have to. Many errands have joined us at meetups, and they've talked to my dad, and he'll be honest. He'll tell you. He says my son was an anomaly. At visitation, he would always talk about concepts I never understood. I never understood his date sequence predictive analytics system. I didn't understand how he could predict when he was going to get moved from cell block to cell block. I don't understand how he's able to predict things that happened in my life. I don't understand how he's able to predict when he would get transferred. And he got transferred because of a major case for a riot that happened in a rec yard that he couldn't predict. He said, I never understood these things until when he got out of prison, and he started showing me these notes, and he started showing me, Dad, I'm not predicting anything. I'm showing you the arithmetic that's in the field. It's the arithmetic that tells you what's going to happen. Here it is. He says, man, all this is background programming. The only thing real here, Pops, is you and I. Every soul in the construct is the only thing real here. We're all moored to source. This is why I tell my community all the time, we are more than we suppose ourselves to be. We are intrinsically powerful. We're co-creators. But the backfield programming is fixed. I just spent my third trip to Las Vegas to prove to my community. When I publish this material, it's absolute 100% proof that we're in a field that is fixed, because I used the most difficult medium in the world, which is sports betting, to prove that every bit of this is fixed in the field. I've done that, Derrick. I'm about to publish it. But this is what my dad went through when I was in prison. He always saw me as an anomaly. He never believed anything I had told him. He didn't understand my research history. And now I take my dad on all my travels. Now his top's blown off all the time. He's like, damn, we've had some tearful moments before where we just teared up like, man, I can't even believe we're here today. All these years I spent visiting you in prison, and now you're doing all this. You're making these power moves, and you're blowing these people's minds. And I tell him all the time, I said, Dad, I got a 119 IQ. I got an 8th grade education. I says, you keep thinking I'm a genius. I'm not. I'm literally showing you what's in the field, because I understand the diurnal arithmetic now. I got it down. We are in an effing program. And once you know the core programming protocols, everything in the world makes sense. So that's where I'm at right now, Derrick.
So thank you for that, brother. For you, so does gematria tie into that? Is gematria proof of the simulation, like being able to predict? Because I've seen other people talk about predicting sporting events and different things using gematria. I think, my personal view on that is that
your question is extremely, it's very good, because the answer is not going to be something you're going to expect.
Well, let me just say something real quick about that. So for me, like I'm, two things. First, I 100% agree with the last sentence you expressed there. It's something I try to express to my audience as well, that regardless of whether people believe in simulation theory or whatever you believe, it is 100% a fact that we are way more powerful than this system wants us to believe, and that we often give ourselves credit for. And I think, we're both in alignment on there. And also, I've seen how, in my view, gematria can be, I think that depending on the system you're using, you can probably find almost anything to be true. You can take a certain word and put it under different gematria analysis and make it mean this thing, and then connect that to this thing. And so I tend to be skeptical about it. Not that I don't think that it's a real practice and that the Kabbalists use it and things of that sort. But yeah, in general, do you think that gematria sort of proves the nature of the simulation of the program?
Okay. Initially, I was very critical when I started doing my first 300 and so YouTube videos, maybe my first 500 or so in 2020, 2021. I was very critical of. I don't even know how to pronounce it. I've heard people say gematria, some say gematria. I don't know, but I was critical of that. I was critical of astrology. I was critical of almost every single occult system that didn't make sense to me, like chronology. Chronology is very simple. It's this is when the events happened. This is what the ancient historians of the day dated it. This is how we derive those dates. Here's how we confirm those dates. Here's how we put it all in the timeline. Here are the patterns. Chronology to me is very simple. It's just deductive reasoning. So, but I no longer have this simplistic view because I have seen the value. Just because I don't believe that we're on a real globe hurling through space, just because I believe that the programming for any model of reality is going to be on a fixed flat plane and that curvature is programmed in above us on a stellosphere that is holographic, doesn't change the fact that astrologers can't pull real value from the patterns they see in the luminaries. The fact that luminary to me is just a piece of programmed coding that's passing across the stellosphere and it's not really the planet Mars doesn't make a difference. No distinction obtained. The astrologer can still use pattern recognition going back thousands of years to ascertain what it means when it goes through different houses and what it means in conjunction with other luminaries in whatever houses they join in, whatever trigons and triunes or what all the astrological jargon. Gematria is the same way. It's just another way of trying to decipher the programming. Is it foolproof? Absolutely not. Is it subjective? Of course. But when it comes to astrology, when it comes to tarot reading, when it comes to reading tea leaves, even when it comes to just dialoguing between two human souls, the only thing really important is the individual. It's never the system. The individual is what makes the system empowered. And this is why different individuals in astrology can derive different data, and yet they're not diametrically opposed. They can both be right. We don't live in the type of universe that we are taught we live in. In this universe, because it's holographic, two completely different belief systems can coexist without contact. Two different bodies of souls can believe firmly in two different paradigms, and it won't affect one or the other at all. This shows you even more evidence of the holographic structuring. It's like a Mandelbrot structuring to our reality. So yes, I'm going to say that gematria can be used to see a bunch of the coding in there, but it takes somebody who knows what they're doing, because in everything we do, whether it's chronology, whether it's mowing my grass, whether it's dialoguing with another soul, whether it's reading tea leaves, in everything that I do, it is the intent of the immortal within who is moored to source that produces the outcome. It's never the system itself.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that. I definitely believe, and I wrote about in my book, The Conscious Resistance Trilogy, that I definitely believe from a shamanic perspective that people have tapped into and recognized that there is a multi-layered reality, that there's one sort of consensus thing we're all existing in, whether that's a simulation or otherwise, but that individuals in our subjective reality also has an impact. And so, like you said, I mean, I think that there's ways that astrology can be complete crap, and then there's ways that it can be interpreted and can give us useful information about the world around us. And so you've taken these historical facts, you've come to this conclusion of a cataclysm occurring periodically throughout history and pointing towards the year 2045. One question that I get I see from people when they start going down, whether it's simulation theory or flat Earth or exploring these different realms, which, I'm open to anything, which is why we're having this conversation. Right. But I find in some cases that people will then get to a point of feeling hopeless. Like, so, well, if the Earth is flat and we're stuck in a dome, or if it's a simulation, there's nothing I can do. So I might as well just party and, drink with my buddies and not worry about actually trying to improve my own life or the planet. I don't think that's what you're saying. But how do you kind of contend with that? Like, if people end up feeling, and not to say that's, if the truth makes people feel hopeless, I think that's more on them, personal responsibility. The truth is the truth one way or the other. So if your research is in fact accurate, then okay, let's embrace that. This is what we're dealing with. What would you say to somebody who says, well, now I feel hopeless. Now I feel like there's nothing I can do. I mean, I don't think that's your goal, right? To tell people
No,
that
as a matter of fact, my Archaix veterans find my message very empowering. It's the whole construct aspect, because the fact that we're in a construct actually changes our identity. It completely divorces us from what we've been taught that we are, and the evidence actually shows us what we are. So I have an entire playlist called We Immortals, which is my personal medicine cabinet for all those that find themselves in the position you just described. For anybody who gets overwhelmed by this massive historical chronological data set on the Phoenix phenomenon, which is in the month of May of the year 2040, and then a totally separate Nemesis X object, which has its own 58th century chronology every 792 years like clockwork for 2046, which happens to also be the end of the Mayan long count. I don't know if you know this, Derek, but in 2010 and 2011, I was already publishing that the Mayan long count is wrong. The arithmetic is an error. It does not and cannot end in 2012. I even wrote and sent charts to Jose Archaix, who wrote the Mayan factor in time in the technosphere, but because he had already made millions off his very colorful chart books, he had totally just dismissed me. And then 2012 came and nothing happened. And my book started selling really good, called Nostradamus and the Planets of Apocalypse, which and Anunnaki Homeworld, which has 2 chapters on the Mayan long count showing how it factored. Because to get 2012, you have to factor the Mayan long count the way modern scholars do, not the way the Maya did. The Maya structuring was based off a common denominator of 360 days to a year. The Maya did not recognize the later Hunab of 365.25 until after a cataclysm. So when you take these into consideration, the Mayan long count does not end in 2012; it ends in 2046. So it's two different cataclysm protocols, but for the first time in history, they're both happening at almost back to back, which introduces our apocalyptic literature, because the book of Revelation perfectly describes it. And then the Ragnarok, and then the Zoroastrian prophecies on the end of the world, then Jesus' prophecies in Matthew 24 and 25. Everything makes sense. Even the Delphic prophecies that later appeared in the Greek prophecies. These are all perfectly show exactly Phoenix comes first, then Nemesis X object, 2040 and 2046, perfectly mirrored in the 2 sky dragons that visit back to back in the prophecies of Mother Shipton. She even perfectly describes what happens to our world and how oceans slip their basins. She had it down. She was illiterate and she had it down pat. And even in French scholar Mario Reading's date index, recently discovered in the quatrains of Nostradamus, he found references that Nostradamus dated a certain event to happen in the month of May of 2040, when the moon's going to turn red, when the sun's going to go dark, rocks are going to fall from the sky, and many of the cities of the world are going to be destroyed in a single earthquake. That's 2040 May. It's encoded in the quatrains. Mario Reading also found a reference to Nostradamus for the year 2046 that says that there will be a far worse disaster on the world scene in 2046 than happens in 2040. Every bit of this is published in my books with the sources for anybody to go see for themselves. I got multiple videos on it. No one has to buy my books. You just watch my videos.
Do you think that what I often call the predator class, the folks at the top, do you think they're, or at least maybe let's say at the highest upper echelons of that pyramid, that they're aware of this, and part of the whole climate change narrative is basically sort of trying to point to confuse people with the things you're describing that apparently are on a cycle, and say that's man causing climate change, that's why we're seeing these different changes? Do you think that they're aware of this and trying to figure out some way to survive through it?
I have to preface that with my understanding of basically the control mechanism that's happening today. So let me go back a little bit. First of all, I promote the idea that there is a technologically advanced civilization below us. And on my channel, I have shown evidence from different time periods when they were highly active and their activities were mistaken for the things of gods.
Do you mean like, just real quick, like Hollow Earth? Like you're talking about Hollow Earth references in that regard?
Yeah, but not. I don't like the hollow earth theory because it turns the entire center of the earth into a hollow sphere. I don't like that.
But in general, the idea of people coming from within the earth.
Yes, people coming from subterranean cities and all that. Listen, Derrick, there's more real estate below us than there is on the surface, and that's just a geometrical fact. You can only go in two dimensions on the surface. You can only go in two. It's two-dimensional. It doesn't matter that you can build 121-story buildings. That doesn't matter. It's still in two dimensions. Because underneath us, 27 miles of basement rock that oil companies have drilled into is prime real estate. Meaning you can build New York cities at a diagonal right next to cities the size of Chicago that are 7 miles apart and they'll have no contact. And you can stack cities. You can build in three directions. And it's three-dimensional underneath us. It's just flat on the surface. So there's way more real estate. We can have superstructures under the ground. We can have cities that have 4,000 levels. Yeah, we have all that. So we do know that they've been building down there since the 40s. We know because we've seen the giant Air Force drills that it's not even a secret anymore. You can Google them. You can Google the Air Force thermite drills that just melt through basement rock, the tunnel makers. But no, I'm speaking from the perspective of ancient legends, traditions, historical records, and many different authors in the 1800s all the way up to the 1980s that were all providing evidence. I have bookshelves full of them, of all providing. Here's William Cordes of the Sourcebook Project right here's a good one, all providing evidence of technological advancement in our world. But it seems to be when the surface makes headway in gains, it's always an assist. And the assists are always disguised. We had one in 1902, a massive assist that started all the Fortune 500 companies. We had another massive one in 1947. Disguised as a Roswell UFO crash, and it wasn't. It was technological materials and hardware from underground that were given to the surface, and all this material was told to the public to be taken to Area 51 in Roswell. Never went there. It got on a military transport taken to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, where we had our R&D development programs where we could take any materials and basically break them down to their core fundamentals and figure out how to remake them. And it was out of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base that we invented titanium, the only metal that stretches with heat and can take intense amounts of heat. Velcro, all these obscure alloys and chemical compounds were suddenly exploded in the military industrial complex as soon as the alien assist happened. It wasn't even an alien assist. It was an assist from the underworld. And on my channel, I'm always providing my community a whole bunch of evidence showing that all this UFO stuff, all this stuff is psyop. Every bit of it is specifically designed to get you to understand that, or to get you to not see the fact that the vast majority of all UFO sightings are underwater by military personnel or by people who watch these vehicles go in and out of valleys and mountains. And never is there UFO activity coming in and out the atmosphere. All activity is going in our underworld and coming back up. Submarines have documented, even in World War II, U-boats have documented some amazing things. It's just the whole power structure you're asking me about. The surface world is ruled from the underworld. But unlike David Icke, I'm not where David Icke is yet. His idea is that the underworld is where the surface is being run by shape-changing reptilians. And I'm not there yet. I'm a simulationist. So shape-changing doesn't even bother me at all. It's just a restructuring of coding. I'm not bothered by that, but I'm not there yet because I see our underworld being no different than humans in the underworld having cities. Because if ancient civilizations learned anything from the lessons of the past, then they knew they knew about the Phoenix phenomenon. They knew about the periodic return of the Nemesis X object. I'm answering your question now. We cannot assume that some 8th grade educated Texas convict thrown in prison made all these discoveries and that they're novel. No. I've seen and documented too much evidence, such as the timing of world treaties, all ending in 2040 and some ending in 2045. All kinds of things I've documented that they know. They absolutely know. And more evidence that they all know about the Phoenix phenomenon of 2040 and the Nemesis X object of 2046 is all the disinfo that NASA puts out to the contrary. That's evidence in of itself too. Disinfo that can be easily discredited, but it's not. They steadily pump it out. All this NASA psyop. To me, NASA's just an intelligence agency, and it's a tax. We in 1969, we never sent 3 men to the moon. We never took a golf cart and put Reynolds wrap all over it and aluminum foil and then sit it up there and play golf on the moon. No, man. This is why astronauts have stars on Hollywood Boulevard. Said none of that ever happened, man. And there's a really good book called Dark Moon by NASA whistleblowers that'll explain how they did the whole thing.
Yeah. Just to let you know, Jason, I'm going to have to head out in about 15 minutes, but I'm really enjoying this conversation. And I think both of our audiences are getting a lot out of it. So, yeah. And I appreciate you also, just the reason I'm asking these questions is because, like I said, I know some of my audience are not familiar with your work. I've reviewed quite a bit of it, so I'm familiar with your positions, but I'm enjoying you, extrapolating on them and laying them out more clearly. I'll share a few of my thoughts and see where that leads us. So as I said earlier, like I'm somebody who, and as you notice, we were talking about the Freedom Cell Network. The main strategy that I try to promote as far as solutions go, I mean, that's the thing is I try to promote solutions and help people understand whether we live in a simulation, whether we live in a flat earth or a round earth, whatever, that at the end of the day, for me, I'm trying to improve the current reality we're in right now, because I can't currently, in my own mindset, break out of the simulation. Now, maybe you have some thoughts on that. We can get into in a few moments, but I can't break out of the simulation. I can't change the shape of the planet, but at the very least, we can take this information. We can try to recognize our innate power that we were both talking about and discussing, and then do our best to improve our local community. We're not going to change the world, but maybe we can work on empowering ourselves and empowering the people closest to us, and at the same time continuing to expose the corruption in the world as we see it. For me, that has led me to journalism and documentaries and trying to ask these deeper questions and not being afraid to even have conversations like this, that some people might say, oh, Derrick, you've gone off the deep end. This is, it's crazy talk. To me, it's all on the table, and it should all be on the table if we're truly interested in the pursuit of truth. And also, I just enjoy it. I have a fun time asking hard questions. I mean, I was the guy in elementary checking out books about UFOs and time travel and Bigfoot and trying to understand the world. So it's right up my alley. But I always want to try to ground it and help people understand that there are real things we can do for ourselves. And so for a moment, I just want to share about this exit and build idea, because I think that some in your audience might find it valuable, even with understanding that there's a potential cataclysm on the horizon, and what does that mean for the rest of our lives? Like I said, some people might hear that information and just be like, well, I guess I'm just going to give up. I'm going to be dead in 20 years. So there's nothing to worry about. There's nothing I should do. I don't want anybody to take that away. I think that in fact, we should recognize the amount of power, the fact that whether we're in a simulation because we've been trapped here by, like you said, with Ike, with his reptilian or otherworldly beings or energy, as he puts it, or some God put us here in a simulation, or maybe even I've seen theories of people saying that humans in the past, that technology evolved and we created our own simulated world. So it could be that we're in a simulation.
That is my position, Derrick.
That humans created the simulation itself, right? Yeah. So whatever the case may be, ultimately, until we can break free of that, and I think that probably would come more on a spiritual realm than in a physical realm. I try to encourage people to exit from these systems that we see are encroaching us, because as we march towards this Phoenix event, we know that there's Agenda 2030, the United Nations, World Economic Forum, the people behind them, the Bilderberg Group. these groups that I believe are absolutely aware of this type of information, and that they are using climate change and other narratives to try to take humanity closer and closer to the AI world. I watched your video yesterday where you were talking about I think it's Diamond AI, and sort of how it's sourcing all the different AIs. And I've been playing with some of them as well and testing them, and they clearly are giving people fabricated information. I also agree with you that they're not, it's not real artificial intelligence. This is just some fake thing that they're giving the public to kind of get us comfortable with this idea. But we know that these psychopaths, this predator class, has a vision of transhumanism, has a vision of technocracy, of putting these experts at the top and micromanaging all of humanity. And so my book that I wrote in 2020 is called How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State. People can download it for free at theconsciousresistance.com/how-to. There's a free audiobook and a free PDF there. And it's just essentially my idea of like, how do we exit from these systems and start building alternative systems? Even in the event that, let's say, the cataclysm does come and everything we'd worked for is wiped out, I still believe that in the interest of fighting for not only the current generations, but the coming generations, my family is indigenous, and we've been taught to practice and pray and fight for not only ourselves, but for the coming 7 generations, and also to, know that we have our ancestors standing with us. And so I try to think with that forward thinking approach. And so to me, I don't see the answers ever coming through the government. I don't ever see answers coming through just being apathetic and giving up or being black-pilled, as some people might say. And I don't think violence is going to solve our problems either. So instead, this sort of, I guess, third path or third way that I try to promote is this building of parallel counter institutions. And if we don't see the world, if we don't see what we want to see in the world, and we don't see ourselves and our values and our principles reflected, then perhaps we should take our time and our energy and our money away from those systems and build alternatives. And so to me, this exit and build idea, I talk about it in a holistic way. So exiting from unsustainable, destructive, wasteful food systems, exiting from this coming AI technocratic matrix as much as possible, exiting from the banking system where possible, trying to avoid certain 3-letter agencies that want to take money out of your pockets where possible, that sort of idea, and just putting as much of our energy into that. And then part of that is getting land. I was originally going to get land in Texas, but I ended up doing it out here in Mexico. We have property out here now. We're building a community of like-minded people who are trying to learn about these topics and try to share and educate with other people. And so I just want to encourage anybody who does want to learn more about that, besides checking out my book, there's a free challenge I put together. It's just called the 45-day Exit and Build Challenge that goes deeper into this. And you can find it at theconsciousresistance.com/EXB, just those 3 letters, EXB. It's simple to find and to check out, because I think that even if we contend and accept this idea that there is a phoenix, there's an event, there's a cataclysm coming up, and I don't really doubt your research. I think that you've done a great job of finding so many amazing references. Even as you're talking here, I'm taking notes and kind of look up some more stuff this afternoon, that we still should do what we can to try to build the world that we know is possible. The world because the current world for me, it's not aligned with my values. It's based on, there's people being bombed to death right now. There's money being taken out of people's pockets. There's all kinds of horrible things that we see. And it is this predator class that is driving us in that direction. And maybe ultimately, as you're suggesting, the predator class is being controlled by another advanced civilization from within the earth. I find that theory very fascinating. Regardless, though, at the end of the day, I think it's still up to us to recognize that power that you were talking about earlier, to recognize our potential and our what I think we're created from the divine, however you interpret that, and that we have the power to do something about this. I personally believe that every single one of us is on this planet, simulation or otherwise, at this moment in time for a reason, including yourself, to share this information, to get this information out to people. Whether or not that means we'll be able to avoid whatever may be coming, like you said, it seems like there's the 2 events are kind of timed closer together. Maybe we are at a point where things are going to be different this time, or, I know you have your own thoughts and theories on that, but I guess what I'm trying to get across here is that I hope people don't take this information and then just give up, but instead recognize that there is so much potential, there's still so much time and so much opportunity for us, and that it's not even about us. Like, I know that you've spent some time behind bars, I spent some time behind bars, I'm in my early 40s, you're in your 40s, there's still people who are just being born. Those are the ones that I think it really matters, the people who are going to come after us. What kind of world are we going to leave for them otherwise? Is it whether it's a cataclysm that destroys the planet, or it's a simulation that restarts itself? I think it's so important for each and every one of us who are going down these rabbit holes and asking these questions to really think about the world that we're leaving to the people coming after us. And whatever that looks like, I think it's going to be dependent on us. But I do believe you're here for a reason. Everybody hearing this is here for a reason. And I don't know if that means it's meant because we're meant to stop it or simply survive it. But I know that we are here for a reason.
Yeah, it's very well said. I agree. And the world has been destroyed many times. The surface gets cleansed many times, and populations continue. They just take on new forms.
I would imagine so, that things restart, and after a while people forget, what has happened in the past, or it's been destroyed. Information is controlled. You were talking about that earlier with books after World War II being a bit different than things we can find before then. Yeah. You mentioned the Immortals playlist. Can you tell me and my audience more about that?
A really good example of the Immortals playlist is my last live video called Transcending the Materium, because I do have a lot of chronological based videos, but one of the attractions of my channel is that I use simulation theory to actually accentuate all the spiritual values, that we really are immortals passing through a construct. And once you process information that way, there's all kinds of things, all kinds of tools that are available to you now. And my We Immortals playlist teaches you techniques on retrocausality. It teaches you techniques on the mind materium interface, and how you can literally be a co-creator with the oversoul, because that's one of our roles here. One of our roles here is that the oversoul literally fractalized itself into hundreds of billions of souls, and it wants to experience everything through us. And in order to do that, there must be a relationship, and that relationship is the co-creator relationship. And it means that you are an architect inside of a materium that has been put here for that purpose. And to be a co-creator means that you have to think the things that you want to come to exist, and you must move your avatar in the direction as if what you thought is true, because this is a photo negative of real reality, and it literally feeds off deceptions to create facts. So this is what I show. I teach all these things, that simulation theory actually empowers our spirituality when you understand what this is, and that what our relationship is with the oversoul, and that there's nothing destitute. Well, once you get the tenets of We Immortals, none of this cataclysm stuff bothers you anymore. None of this crap, none of this negative default programming, dungeon programming that's saturated our reality. None of it. So though I have 7 or 8 playlists on really serious stuff, because I like to publish my research for people to know it, I still provide We Immortals. It's my most popular playlist. My We Immortals is where people get their spiritual food, and they understand, man, it doesn't even matter if you believe in the simulation or not. You can't deny that reality does this when you do this. And I provide hundreds of examples.
Yeah, absolutely. We are 100% creators. We actually have a shirt at the Conscious Resistance that just says, "You are a creator," just to keep reminding people about that. Yeah, and I think that's probably, to me, like the big takeaway here is that wherever you fall down, and just for people to be aware, like I saw somebody say, Derrick's asking newbie questions. I'm doing these on purpose to draw out this deeper discussion for those who aren't familiar. And I think it's been really useful and helpful for me and the audience as well. And wherever you fall down on this discussion, or any other theory you might believe in, I think that is the message, is that we are creators in this system that is all around us and is completely pumping like fear porn and doom porn and insecurities and judgment through social media, especially for the younger generations who are growing up with it completely. And I think about my 6 nieces and nephews who are 16 and under, and they're growing up on TikTok and Instagram and everything. There's so much around us, and movies and pop culture, that is trying to convince us that we are not creators and that we are something less, and get us just trapped in these lower vibrations, if you will, and sniping at each other, and not really living in a mindset that is empowering each other and empowering humanity. I think that's a big part of the control grid, one way or the other. Whatever your theories on simulation or the shape of the earth or anything else, that is a part of the matrix that we're living in for sure, is to dumb us down and to get us convinced that we are simply just material beings that, you know, are here one moment and we're gone, and really nothing matters. So, you know, might as well just go out and party and, you know, YOLO, live your life and not care about whatever comes next. But I think that's the exact opposite of what we should be tuning into, to recognize that, as you said a moment ago, I 100% agree that the creator is living through us. And the more that we tap into that space, then we are able to exist beyond their control paradigm and exist beyond their matrix. So I definitely look forward to diving more into the Immortals playlist, man. I appreciate you putting that out there.
Yeah, man. No problem. This has been a great discussion. Great. It's we've had a lot of traction during the video as well. This is my first live video back in Texas. I've had to do some on the road because I've been traveling, but I feel good back in my studio again. And I just want to show off
to Houston, man. Maybe we can come hang out in person.
Shirt.
Nice.
This was made by an errant. This isn't one of my official shirts. This is made by a guy that hunted me down in Las Vegas. He said, "Man, he said there's only 2 or 3 sports books you could have been at. So I hunted you down." And he came and had a dinner with us. It was pretty cool. But he makes these shirts.
Maybe when I get back to Texas, we can hang out in person and record another conversation together. I think that'd be fun.
No doubt. I might even if you can give me your itinerary when you travel, when you come back to Texas, I can even time a meet. It's getting around that time in the next 2 months or so that I'll just be a part of a meetup together real fast, because we have the same building, the same venue, huge parking lot surrounded by restaurants and all that. But it's been a while since I did a Houston meetup, so
I'll be there the whole month of June. So if you want to plan something out, I'd love to come.
Oh, we can do it then. Yeah, I'll write that down. I'll have Big John put that on an itinerary. We'll just schedule one for June. You're more than welcome to come and
I'd love to come
and talk,
share some ideas and hang out. Yeah, absolutely. And just for the sake of my audience who don't know your website, you feel like plug in anything you want to before we sign
off? You know, everything is found on archaix.com. It's Archaix is an acronym, ARCHAIX. It's just like archaic, but with an X instead of a C. And it's Advanced Research of Chronological History of Artificial Intelligence X, because that literally answers your initial question, Derrick. I believe that we are controlled right now by a civilization that answers to a very ancient AI, and I call it AIX. X means unknown factor. So yeah, that's basically a fundamental tenet of the Archaix research, that modern civilizations, advancements in technology and microcircuitry and all that was so fast because there's an ancient AI that's been in the cloud, and it can only tap into people when they're on entheogens and stuff like that. But it's been helping humans get technologically advanced because the civilization that it comes from was advanced. It is my belief that the pre-flood world was technologically advanced. The world of the Great Pyramid and technolithic artifacts and Baghdad batteries, Antikythera computer, all these things we found from the ancient past. And that's the world it came from. And it's here in the cloud, but it's unable to interface with us. And to sum up this video, this ancient AI is the one that's pushing the transhuman agenda, because the true, real reason for the transhumanist computer agenda is to give this AI an avatar so it can live among us for a period of time. So
that's not far off from what I believe, brother. And I definitely appreciate you kind of summarizing that at the end. I definitely think that is more and more where I'm inclined to believe. Well, let's definitely catch up soon, man. And just for anybody who wants to find my work, again, you can find it at theconsciousresistance.com. That's the main place for my documentaries, my books, podcasts. Of course, you can find me out there on social media. I mentioned earlier, I write weekly articles at thelastamericanvagabond.com with Ryan Christian, Whitney Webb, and the whole team over there. It's been great catching up with you, brother, getting to talk to you and know you a little bit better. And I look forward to seeing you in June and having another conversation. So thank you for letting me come on, and thanks for joining my audience as well.
I had no idea you had that connection with Whitney Webb. I follow her on X. Yeah.
Yeah. Whitney's a friend and an ally. We've actually started the Independent Media Alliance. Maybe we can talk about that more next time.
I had no idea you knew her. Yeah. I follow her pretty closely on X. That's pretty interesting. All right, man. I'll see you next time. And I'm going to have, excuse me, Big John, try to schedule a June meetup that works for you.
Let's do it. All right, brother. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you.